Okay, we're gonna get started here for our sixth and final panel. I do wanna say one thing, which is that one of the things that Lee Rayford and I have talked about and dreamt about over the years is just having a community of folks who have been touched by this project and who will go out into the world and do things and know that there was that special time that we shared together where we learned together. And I guess I'm just feeling that right now because of our moderator, but also just the many ways that everyone here is so connected to this work as they do their work, and their work shifts in all these beautiful ways. And this panel already is a representation of that. So my heart is just full. So I'd like to turn it over to our lovely, esteemed former dissertation fellow, Jared Robinson. Thank you so much.
Hello. Because I'm me, I'm gonna say some nerdy stuff and then get to the actual thing that we're supposed to be doing here. So all of you maybe know this, but it bears repeating, I think. In 1773, the poet and revolutionary prophet Phyllis Wheatley wrote a poem on imagination, which is the topic of this panel, Imagining Black Futures. And she writes, "Imagination, exclamation mark, who can sing thy force?" That who, I think, is really important because for me, as a member of the Black Studies Collaboratory, having attended the events after that and then being honored to be here, I just think about the work of these two professors, Lee and Tiana, and the imaginative force that they were able to conjure in order to bring us all here today, all the scholars and activists and artists whose imaginative force was used to kind of create all of these things, which kind of seemed to come from nothing, but instead come from an immense amount of labor, and of course, always Barbara. So great. Exactly. Imagination, just to get us in a little bit of a nerd headspace, is the faculty or action, right, of forming new ideas, images, and concepts. This is the important part of external objects not present to the senses, right? Taking things which are not before us, things which cannot be in the world yet, and forming them from the mind outward. And I think the work of this collaboratory, of the scholars assembled on this panel, is an example of that exact kind of imaginative force. So when Phyllis asks who, we answer us. And so I'm so happy to be here today to moderate this panel, Imagining Black Futures. The first speaker will be Brie McLemore, who will have a project called Afrofuture Techno Dreams, a Black feminist reimagining of the internet and beyond. The second is Francesca Araújo, Festival de Cultura Boreal in Santiago. I don't speak Spanish. With Barrio Alante. And then Williams-Yackel and Ms. Daphne Muse, who together form the collaborative project Old School plus New School equals Mo Better School, which to me really defines a lot of the kind of lateral, non-hierarchical, intergenerational, and interdisciplinary practices of this collaboratory. So I just want to hand the kind of the mic over to these people and stop talking. So if you would please, fellow panelists, and maybe in alphabetical order, starting with Brie, tell us a little bit briefly about your project and maybe move through whatever slides you have for us today. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the intro. My name is Brie McLemore. I'm a PhD candidate in the jurisprudence. Okay. I'm a PhD candidate in the jurisprudence and social policy program, and which is in the law school here at Berkeley. And so my dissertation's on surveillance and technology. And so when I was thinking through what I wanted this project to look like, it really came from my mom called me one day and was just like, hey, so what's a cookie on my phone, and all these sort of questions that were technical. And I had this moment of I've been reading and writing about these things and interviewing people, but my mom doesn't really know what it this really important thing about technology and surveillance. And it just got me thinking of all of the ways that Black communities are the sort of subjects of technology, often as they're discussed, but don't really have the ability to engage with it, and also how the way that technology operates, it's supposed to be sort of difficult to interpret, difficult to understand because of the terminology that's being used. And so I really wanted to think through a project that sort of flipped that on its head, and also just thinking about how Black women, Black queer, Black femme communities are they're the best part of the internet. If you've ever laughed on the internet, it's because of them. So it's just also thinking through what does it mean to sort of center Black feminist like theories, but also Black feminists themselves as when we think about the internet and technology. And so I had a slide, I don't know. Oh, yeah. So the bulk of the project really centered around what I was calling pop-up libraries. And so they used a lot of zines and a lot of different resources that were made mostly by the Allied Media Project, which has a lot of feminist scholars and activists. And so they created a lot of these memes, but also other ones that I found online that had, breakdowns about cybersecurity and breakdowns about how to, protect yourself from doxing. And so the libraries were placed in Restore Oakland, which is a community center in Fruitvale, also in the East Bay community space in North Oakland, and another, the Rock, Paper, Scissors Collective, which is a zine library in West Oakland. And so that became kind of the bulk of the project. And then also on the right, there was a public speaking engagement with Tawana Petty, who's just an amazing Black feminist activist. She's in Detroit, and so she did a lot to fight facial recognition software and also different forms of surveillance in Detroit. And so I think her story is really inspiring because the way she got involved in this is that she's a mom, and she just saw that her son going through school, all of these different ways that schools were finding to surveil him. And so that's what really catapulted her into being a surveillance activist. So she came to Oakland just a few weeks ago, and she gave this amazing presentation. And so that's kind of been the project.
Thank you so much, Brie. And we'll move on to Francesca now.
Whoops, sorry. I'm going to talk about my project in a concrete way, and then I'll talk about the reasons why I wanted to do it. And then instead of doing this in the beginning, I'll end by thanking Professor Pashal and Professor Rayford, because I have a thank you that's connected to my project. But this is my second small grant, and for my first one, I don't know if some people might remember that it was centered in music from the Hispanophone Caribbean, and my tenuous relationship with the political project that is Latinidad, and by tenuous I mean I see no future in it. But this time, I wanted to do a project that was still centered in the culture of the Hispanophone Caribbean, but in a more grounded manner, because I really like theory, but I realized that I actually like theory so much that even when I try to do grounded things, I make them very theoretical. So my project was a transnational collaboration with a group called Barrio Alante, which in English means hood moving forward or hood to the front. And it was a queer and trans and Black-led social movement that was politically autonomous, and it was a collective that had that had several satellite networks. So it wasn't a nonprofit, and it wasn't a state organization in any way, and it wasn't connected to state institutions, which in any national context is, to me, the vanguard of what the future I want looks like. But they were a collective that did work from and for the hood in the DR, specifically in Santo Domingo. And they had already been working on this concept to put together a Festival de Cultura Barrial, which means a festival of culture from the hood, or hood culture, and several various neighborhoods in Santo Domingo, which is the capital of the Dominican Republic. And the project consisted of a large constellation of collaborations that work towards an assemblage of community-based and run festivals, each with their own specific artistic and cultural concerns that highlighted youth and the hood Black culture in these communities. And the reason they were all different was because the way that the festivals were being put on was through a series of meetings that community members had to decide what they wanted their festival to look like. Like what is beautiful about our neighborhood? What are the cultural productions that we're making? Because it's not the same. Even though it's all in the capital city, the neighborhoods are all different. So the point of this for them and for me as I was learning with them wasn't just to visibilize the depths of hood cultures and art, but to give communities the space to rehearse what it would mean to live beyond the nation state. For example, the neighborhood that my family's from, where my grandma lives, which was the festival that I was the most connected to, because my point person from Barrio Alante was like, this is where you're from, so this is the one that you should like do the most work in. It's a very musical neighborhood. It's like one of the most important places where like dembow and Dominican rap emerged from. So their festival was a Festival de Letras y Rap, so it was like a music festival. Okay, so now I guess I'll move on to my impulse for working with Barrio Alante. I had been following Barrio Alante for a while. I just thought they were really dope and that they were doing really cool stuff. In general, like stuff that everyone in the world should be looking to. And I was really drawn to how the work didn't depend on a single person, or wasn't dependent on a single face, or even like an organizational committee in any way I had ever seen before. I was super drawn to the way that each community retained so much autonomy when they were deciding what they wanted their festivals to look like. But I was mostly drawn to the extremely realistic approach of thinking about what it means to simultaneously make a claim and demand of the state, to demand something from the state, while also affirming that state capture and visibility is not the ultimate goal or desire in celebrating yourself and your culture. So what would it look like to both understand that state capture and state affirmation isn't our goal, but not live in a fantasy land where we're going to pretend that we're not constantly living under the state's violence, because that is a condition that people are constantly living under. I also have been thinking a lot about, especially since I moved to California, what it means to be, this is so, okay, here we go again, what it means to be a child of immigrants. And I've always thought about that, but I think because I'm from the Northeast, my orientation has always been towards the Atlantic. I have never lived in a place where my whole world has been turned upside down. And so to a certain extent, I feel like I've always lived in an extremely circum-Caribbean reality. And now living in California, I have been thinking a lot more about the relationship that anyone who's in the condition of being the child of an immigrant has to their parents' home countries, especially if your parents are from the Caribbean, which is a place that is a fantasy land and a playground for tourists in an extremely unique manner than other geographies and regions. And I think a lot of the times, Dominican Americans, like many other people from the Caribbean, our relationship to the island becomes like going to a resort, or when you visit it, you go to the places that are a part of the colonial circuit. And I also didn't want to sentimentalize my relationship to being a child of immigrants. Like I want to move beyond like the romance and sentimentality of like how distraught or disconnected that might make me feel, and instead think about what my material position is and what it means that I'm someone who benefits from passport apartheid, and like what it looks like to, this is something that people say a lot in the humanities, but especially in Black studies, and I appreciate this, is when you think about your work, who are the communities that you're accountable to? And I think that's a good question, and sometimes I hear it and it almost feels like the room lets out a deep exhale, because it's almost like we've done enough by simply asking the question. So I think I'm pretty clear about the communities I'm accountable to, and I want to put money in their pockets. And I'm really grateful that I was able to do that. And I think in my application, I wrote a lot about having a political commitment to a geography that you care about that goes beyond the fact that your parents are from there, you know? So it was like, I felt super honored to be able to do that. And I'll quicken up now, but I have a few quotes because I love quotes. Rowan Ricardo Phillips' book, When Blackness Rhymes with Blackness, which Professor Tayoma Elliott put me onto. And this quote speaks to why I decided to focus on cultura barrial, hood culture, because my previous project, I spoke a lot about Spanish Caribbean music in general and a lot of things that people deem really valuable, even in Black spaces. And this connects to this quote that Dixie Ramirez, who I respect intellectually so much, she did an interview once and she said, I really hope that more work comes out of cultural studies in DR that celebrates things beyond the folkloric. And I think that's so true because the things that people deem valuable when we're looking towards these other geographies are like the things that are understood as like quintessentially Black, quintessentially African. We are retaining something. So I'm happy that there's work that's being done that's reorienting what's desirable and worthy of celebration to both the nation state itself, but also to hegemonic Western tourism and to other people who are part of the metageography that is Latin America. And yeah, so the quote is, the Caribbean has always been a subject of speculative vision as a mode of Western desire. From the travel narratives and maps of explorers and cartographers to the glossy mass media of tourist agencies and tourist boards. What the Caribbean gives of itself to the first world has been largely a matter of eye candy. Even in its oral evocations, zouk, reggae, salsa, calypso, and such, the arts of the Caribbean have been overburdened by a glut of exportable visual signs for foreign consumers. The Hood festivals meant a lot to me because it's hard to export the things that are the true visual flesh symbols of Blackness, at least, and to me in every context, but in this specific context, which are really tied to poverty and state neglect and degradation and horrible infrastructure and lack of clean running water. And that doesn't mean that people's lives are a tragedy, but the conditions are tragic. And I want that kind of Blackness to be paid attention to. So my thank you is, I'm so, so, so grateful that I was able to do this through the BSC. And when I saw that I was on the Black Futures section, that meant a lot to me because it just made me think about like what it means that at least some people in my life believe that a small island geography has something to tell us about the future. As we know, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, no, I'm playing, he actually landed in the Bahamas. So when people rehearse and repeat that year over and over and over and over, and then make a giant oceanic leap towards the continental United States, it's extremely confusing to me. And the first permanent colonial site of the New World was in fact the Dominican Republic. So anyways, I say that to say that, like Lisan's quote where he says he believes in the future of small countries, but I would rather say I believe in the future of small islands. I feel like so honored that an island geography that suffers a perpetual footnote condition can tell us something about a Black future beyond imposed narratives from any other part of the world. And that the place that gets to do that is the Hood, which is a blueprint for everything.
Wonderful, thank you. And now from the Mo Better School.
Hello. Yeah, where to begin? I mean, I think it's important to note that old school plus new school equals Mo Better School is a phrase that emerged out of the sort of constant conversations that Miss Muse and I would have in her living room while eating food and imagining what to do with her collection. And for those of you who don't know, Miss Muse has one of the most astounding garages I've ever seen in my entire life. It's a collection of over 12,000 rare, signed, and inscribed Black books, as well as a collection in the back of the house of 5,000 letters and various ephemera, including randomly what we found recently, an ashtray from the Black Star Line. Yeah, it keeps going and going and going. I think that maybe like the best way to talk about how this project came about and what it is that for me, it emerged out of a frustration and confusion. The Black Studies Collaboratory took a trip to Miss Muse's house in the beginning of the program. And I guess it was like sort of a time where we were all getting to know each other and sort of figuring out what the Collaboratory would look like. And we took a tour of the house and went into Miss Muse's garage, and I saw cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling, surrounding me everywhere. And Miss Muse explained that she had books in them. So I sort of lingered behind, and I looked at one of them, opened up a box, and it was a copy of Maya Angelou's On the Pulse of Morning, which I believe was the presidential inaugural address that she gave for Bill Clinton's inauguration. And it was a pamphlet from the day. And I looked at it and I was like, what? Why do you have this? I was frustrated. Why do you have this? And Miss Muse noticed that the collection did something to me. And so she asked me to help her work with it. And I'm not sure also if the slides are up. I'm hoping maybe they are. Beautiful. So yeah, these are pictures of the garage. And Old School plus New School equals Mo Better School is also, I'd say, a program that's under the sort of larger banner of the Oasis in the diaspora. And in order to like get a better understanding of Mo Better School, maybe Miss Muse, if you want to talk a little bit about the Oasis and its origins in Oakland, that might be good.
So I moved to Oakland, California in 1975. I bought a house in the hood in 1977. And I, at that time, had a significant collection of rare Black books and ephemera that stood at about 22,000 books. When I moved, I had turned over much of my archive, not much, some to Emory, some to Berkeley, and some to Mills. I taught at Mills. And the idea of an oasis in the diaspora came to me while I was living in East Oakland, because I got a phone call one day asking if I would house for a short period of time a family traveling to LA to get housed and situated. The family was Afeni Shakur, Tupac, and his sister, who was then 2 years old. And from that moment on, people would call and say, I need a place to stay. I want to do a performance there. I want to do a reading there. Alice Walker did her first Bay Area reading at the Oasis. So I created something that is not just unique to me, but something that I want Grant and others like you to inherit and pass on as a concept, as a place where Black lives and cultures are housed, are brought to life through readings, through these collections of letters. And as we have continued to work with one another, we've had the challenges of what it's like to work across the generations. I have had to learn a whole new language rooted in the 21st century. He's had to listen to a whole different language rooted in the 60s and 70s. So those translations and interactions made us realize that we should create something more formal. And out of that idea and Grant's ongoing creative curiosity and the depth of his intellect came the idea to make Old School Mo Better School into a magazine. So now we have a publication that will launch spring 2024 called Mo Better School. And we are also setting up a series of events where we have brought people together on panels. We're doing one on incarcerated, people formerly incarcerated, and the dialogue between the old heads and the young'uns who were in the joint. And then we're doing another one on racially, ethnically, spiritually, and class-blended families, because blended families have had to adapt new practices. For an example, the Muslim family coming to the black barbecue. That presents some challenges. Or the white family marrying into the black family and trying to figure out the whole food thing and the hair thing. And so how people have navigated these, or not, have navigated these challenges, and what some of the new practices are, the new rituals are that have emerged. So one of the things that frustrates both of us is we come up with a gazillion ideas, but we have to really work on focusing on what's going to work best at this time. And we think the magazine will be a really powerful vehicle for the expression of the ideas that come out of the Oasis. And like I said in the beginning, I see this as a concept that other people can adapt and create their own oasis in the diaspora and make it a place where voices are not only across the generations, but the future of Black lives and culture can be incubated in those spaces as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I actually, just inspired by what you guys are talking about and sort of like what I see as like a similarity between your projects, I want to move to the next question, which is meant to be, are there ways that the small grant opened up new opportunities for you with regard to method, and avenues of research and collaborations? But I want to ask it in a way that might like kind of show a little bit of the union of what I see between your projects anyway, which has to do with kind of like all of them being like portable or somehow para-institutional, right? So there's like pop-up libraries or these like festivals that are moving within their own communities. They're all autonomous, as you were saying, Francesca, or the various different guises that fall under kind of activity that fall under the Oasis in the diaspora. And so I want to ask you guys if you've thought about, as you think about the way the small grant opened up opportunities for you, if you've thought about that like portability of your own work, like that the pop-up library can pop up anywhere. The Oasis could be portable. The hood comes from everywhere and takes everything. You know what I mean? And what I'm also curious, and like really in a kind of nerdy way, right? Like, because the great Sylvia Wynter, borrowing from a deconstructionist Sam Weber, talks about the difference between institutions and instituting, the institutionalization of something and its instituting, in order to describe the kind of like different avenues of Black study in the kind of like its development and kind of its ensconcing within this institution. And I wonder, since you guys all seem to be very actively and really interestingly in that instituting phase, the resistant, not yet structural, not yet total, not yet like whole in that really big Western way. I just wanted to, I get you guys' thoughts on that, especially with regard to this like kind of like new opportunities question. Like, what are the new methods that you guys are proposing? How do they relate to the communities that you're interested in? And maybe most importantly, how will you keep them para-institutional? Or maybe that's not the goal,
I guess I can start. Yeah, I think so. When I came up with the idea of this project, I'd gone through qualifying exams, I'd gone through the prospectus, I was like getting really into the dissertation, and I was just sick of theory. Like I was just so sick of it. And I was like trying to think of, and also I think that one of the things about this project is that a lot of the sort of language used around technology is so jargony. It's like really just like incomprehensible. And so I wanted something that wasn't going to have that as like the center focus of how to communicate this. And so like one of the resources I use is an artist who does comics, and she uses she does like different sort of concepts like end-to-end encryption and explains it in like 4 pages using pigeons. And that was like, I was like, I don't want Foucault anymore. Like, I just want pigeons. And like, that's kind of, the part of it was like my own need of like, I need a different way to kind of communicate this and also to read and understand this.
Oh, dumpster.
Yeah, I was like, I just can't, So when I was thinking about like the resources I wanted to use, I also was thinking about the space that I wanted to be in. And so choosing Oakland, because I live in Oakland, I love Oakland. And also just thinking of like Oakland as a space that's next door to Silicon Valley, but has a very different sort of orientation to technology. Like there's a lot of like digital redlinings. There's places that does not have access to like quality internet, even though, most of tech is being made like 15 miles away. So I was just thinking of like the portability of it, of where I wanted to be, making sure it was throughout different parts of Oakland, but also thinking of like, well, where are places where people would engage with this? Because it's time, like it takes time for people to go through and learn about all of these different concepts. And so I think there's this theory that people have within like surveillance or tech scholars that are like, oh, people don't care. And I'm like, people are just tired. And like, it's a lot going on in the world. And so like, people don't really want to sit down and read about end-to-end encryption. So I thought about the concept of like waiting. So like these community centers or like these zine places are like, people go there for different community meetings, but also for different workshops. And so you get there, time hasn't started yet. Like, what are you going to do? And it might be time you're on your phone. Or if you see like the zine that's like nicely colored and like has these different graphics, you might look at it. So it's kind of this place of like, where's those spaces where you would usually fill it with technology because there's not much else to do. And maybe this could be like another way, but it doesn't take away from your day, right? It's time that would have been just sort of open anyway. So I think that was kind of the thought process.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Who wants to go to the university to have to learn when you can simply go to the community center?
Yeah, I don't want to go to the university sometimes to learn.
Neither.
So
I avoided it all possible.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone who would like to speak to it next?
Well, I think the other thing that the Oasis has done and will continue to do is connect community and the academy. That the town-gown relationship has been so fraught across time, and that one of the things that the department has consistently done since it was founded, and it has happened in fits and starts, but it has happened, is they have supported community events. I remember when I was teaching in the department in 1975, back in the Neanderthal era, I went to the department chair. And asked if he would support a Kwanzaa celebration that I did. And the department ponied up a lot of money at that time. Taj Mahal came and told stories. We had a poster that was created. Every child got a black book, and the department underwrote all of that. So I'm seeing more consistency from that connection, and I see the Oasis as a place that certainly can help anchor that. And people come, I live out in Brentwood in Contra Costa County, and people come through the tunnel now. I mean, Grant and Alicia drive through the tunnel once a week, at least, sometimes twice, to come and do the work. So that's a real commitment to their belief in what this practice holds. And out of it, I think will also emerge some new kinds of scholarship. I think the website, which Grant finished last week and we're launching, I think that will also do something to elevate the life of it and the practices that are within. And recently, we have begun to have filmmakers not come physically, but contact us about doing research in the collection. So I'm very pleased about the fact that now that we have the website, that's going to make it even more accessible.
I think one other thing I might add too is that maybe talk a little bit about some of the events that we've done under the banner of Mo Better School. There's one that we did at a local Oakland bookstore called Eternal Now, which many people here were at. This was one of them where Miss Muse and I had a conversation together, and Miss Muse was sort of talking about her experience and the history of sort of like collecting, archiving Black life, and also, Miss Muse used to be a manager of a bookstore in DC called Drum and Spear, and so sort of thinking about the history of and ongoing importance of bookstores as sort of like gathering spaces and place where this work is done. to the question about the sort of like the portability of the work, like it's been happening in so many different places. One of the things that Miss Muse says all the time is that the oasis is a state of mind that you carry with you. Another event that we were really excited about was being able to partner with the Oakland Museum to take some Black high school students to go see the Angela Davis Sees the Time exhibit, which was also like bound up with the work of Lisbeth Tellefson, who is the archivist in residence of the Collaboratory as well. But so, yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I've been really excited about with the Oasis is that it's been able to take so many different forms and live in so many different places, and sort of like, attach on to all of these different spaces and make it its own, even if it's for a short time.
I don't have an answer, but I just want to say I love and appreciate everything you said in your question so much, and I need to take some time to think about what it means to me, but I love how you articulated it.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for your responses to my maybe kind of harebrained questions. As I'm sitting here listening to you and moving on to the questions, because we don't have very much time left, I want to say two things. One, to put the last two questions together, which are questions about when these panelists encountered problems and challenges with their work and how they kind of use their imaginations to adapt and experiment. And also kind of, I think that's connected to, why is the topic of like Black imaginaries or like imagining a Black future so important to you? And it makes me think kind of about, I'm just thinking of this Tongo Eisen Martin poem where like one of the main lines he says is like, it's a life of escapes. That's why he's like kind of like propositioning for his poetic speaker propositions for the lives that he's like trying to contain within his poetry, life of escapes. And I just think about the, even like really practically, sometimes the research proposals we give to our funding bodies are things we must escape from in order to do the work that we actually need to or end up needing to do once we arrive at the places or into the communities or at the archives that we're going to kind of like investigate. So I just wonder if you guys can speak maybe kind of binocularly about both like how imagining a Black future is important to you and to your work and to the work of Black studies, and how maybe that imagination practice, that hope for the future, that escape that you can maybe see but not yet reach, maybe like challenged or like helped you overcome the challenges of your initial proposals. Yeah.
I think we all have a responsibility to imagine. Gwendolyn Brooks' imagination got me here. Dr. Du Bois' imagination got us in this room. June Jordan's imagination got us here. So we have a responsibility to imagine. And you don't have to be, quote, a creative to imagine. Anybody can imagine. And how you translate the imagination into something concrete is a part, again, of what the Collaboratory has allowed us to do. So there's a responsibility, an inherent responsibility that you have in order for these things to manifest. And in this age, for me, of terrifying AI, as a person who is colonized, I have freedom within this society, but I still live in the constructs of the racist structural formations that guide my life. I don't want nothing else controlling my mind. I don't want another thing telling me what to do. So I am very concerned about how we go forward into this world of Afrofuturism, understanding that technology is real, that understanding that the evolution of the mind and the imagination and creativity and all of those things are real, but also keeping in mind what that means and will there be an Afro future?
Thank you so much, Ms. Muse. Do others want to speak to the question of like sort of challenges and overcoming and how imagination is important to you?
I feel like trying to speak on challenges that feels a little distant to me because this project was different for me because I wasn't in the DR for most of the time that it was happening, which was good for me because it made me feel like, I'm really far away, but I can still be a part of something, like in the most, normal way to say that. But I think for imagining Black futures, I've always been really obsessed with the language of apocalypse, and I just like find it to be like a very intriguing word and like an interesting place from which to think from. I even have like Césaire's quote about the end of the world tattooed on me, and I feel like I've been thinking lately a lot, but especially being more speaking to people in a like sustained manner beyond my family who like live in similar neighborhoods to the ones that I went to every summer growing up, about what it means to, I guess, like pause in the knowledge that we are already experiencing apocalypse. Like there is no apocalypse to come. Like that's actually the reality that we've been living in, and that's the reality that a lot of people have been living in, feeling a lot more than me, for a long time. So I think that was really comforting to me because it made me feel like better about, how Paulo Freire says that people are scared to be liberated because it means that like then you have to create something in the void. Like that's why freedom is so scary, because that means that you have to like believe that you have the capacity to put something where there's nothing now. And sometimes I think when I'm like so ready and excited to be like, the future looks like this, I valued this project and this relationship because I like wasn't being forced to be an optimist. I was like being allowed to be a Black nihilist and just like think about the fact that we're living in catastrophe and disaster all the time, and like beautiful things come out of it and everything. But so in terms of the question of imagining Black futures, I feel like it's been helpful for me to like to think about the language of apocalypse before I like prepare myself. Because I think sometimes with that impulse, we keep a lot of the terms with us that we might not want to keep. Like even in our imagination of the future, it's coming from some terms that we're not even realizing that we've accepted. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I'm thinking about, the beginning of Black Skin, White Mask, there's going to be an explosion, or the Toni Morrison children's book, These Kids Can't Handle Their Freedom. Those two things came to mind while you were speaking. So it does, that framework of apocalypse, bringing about the end of one world in order to bring about the beginning of another, does seem to make a lot of sense to me. And Brie, would you like to speak at all to these questions?
Yeah, I think as the project sort of evolved, just what it means to, reimagining is like in the title of the project. And I think that imagination and reimagining kind of altered throughout. And so originally, I think when I thought of the project, I was like, some of the resources are like tools for resistance of how communities can kind of, challenge different sort of technology that comes into their neighborhoods. And that's why Tawana Petty is being like, a really great sort of activist to speak to that. But then another part of the project is being kind of internet focused and thinking about like a lot of ways like social media. Twitter has, the whole evolution of Twitter has happened while this project is going forth. And it sort of made me think more of like, well, how is like technology already being reimagined by people who use it? And so thinking of like Twitter and Instagram and like TikTok, which have these very, very concerning privacy sort of, considerations there, and also can be really exploitative, but also have been like spaces for creativity and expression and, all of these different ways that, Black femmes really have been able to like take these sort of apps and reshape what the negative sort of consequences are to kind of use it in a way that like feels like genuine and freeing to them. So thinking of like how the reimagining is already taking place on the internet. And so how to be able to like identify and see and honor that kind of became sort of where the project sort of ended in a way.
I really admire that about your project and all of these projects, that they seem so like focused on bearing witness to the reimaginings of the communities that they address and attempt to kind of enter and change and become a part of. And I think there's something really admirable because, a lot of times maybe like an academic goes in an almost ethnographic way, but these projects are very much like about being like in the crowds of communities and trying to like build from within them different structures, different maybe institutional structures that can actually be useful to those communities because they are of like quite literally of the text, the materials in the sense of archive, or of the kind of like non-state related autonomous groupings, or these community centers that can now have all of this like information and access that doesn't require them to travel to some ivory tower to get it. I think all of you guys have really thought through and enacted really wonderfully these kind of like projects that allow the community to imagine for itself and like allow you guys to just sort of like bear witness and hold, curate, and sort of like describe, which I think is lovely. And so I don't know that we have much time for questions. We might not have any time at all, but if we have maybe a couple minutes, or we can close out.
Maybe we can, if somebody does have a question.
Are there any questions? Yes, please.
Oh, God.
Hey, Grant, what's the URL for the website?
Oh my God.
Oh, nice.
It is oidbooks.com. oidbooks.com. I'll say it one more time because Professor Taylor taught me to say things 3 times that are important. oidbooks.com.
And are there any further questions? Yeah. Then with that, thank you so much to our panelists.
No, it was just really, yeah, there is a question, but it's just, it's very short. Is there any thought of having different Mo-Better schools in different parts of the country, like the South?
Franchises, baby.
Because I really think that, I just want to say that it's so beautiful to see this intergenerational cross of knowledge, because I do think that new school plus old school equals a Mo-Better school. Yeah.
Well, there are a couple of opportunities on the horizon that I can't disclose, in the moment, but there is one that will be a transatlantic kind of Mo-Better school, and it's just in the very embryonic stages. But yes, and to your point about the South, I am the child of 2 rural Georgia parents, and I worked in the South as an activist. So the South is very much, continues to slide out my mouth. It's also embedded very much in my spirit. So, and I would like to talk to you a little bit more after.
The answer I would also give to that question really quickly is that the Oasis has also, sort of been in collaboration with various bookstores just sort of around, one of which is located, where's Katie at? She's
Atlanta.
In Atlanta. There's a woman named Katie Mitchell who is writing actually a compendium of Black bookstores and their history right now. Who came out to visit the Oasis, and, I guess we'll have a part in her book, but so I mean, the collaborations, it feels to me, are sort of already in motion, but like to have an actual Mo-Better School event somewhere in the South would just be like a dream.
And an actual Mo-Better School that is K through 12. I like that. I like K through 12 Mo-Better School. Yeah.
Please hire me. No, thank you so much to our panelists. Can we clap for them? Yeah.
Thank you, Jared, for moderating and for bringing the energy at the end of the day and the beautiful quotes.
Thank you, Jared.
All for you.
And I want to thank you all for all the presenters, the moderators, the audience members, those of you who stuck it out, those of you who stuck it out at this part, who ate, who asked questions, who, gave each other good vibes at lunch. I just want to thank Barbara again for all of her work. The irony, Francesca, is that it was Barbara who moved you to the Futures panel, which makes total sense. I can't even take credit for that. But I think that's also, I just want to thank you all for the 2.5, 3 years of this project, for trusting us with your ideas, and your brilliance and your energy and your love, and giving us a chance to help radiate back to you all that you are putting into the world. So we really thank you for that.
And I do want to give a shout out to all the graduate students who've been a part of this project from the beginning to the end. Rachel Anspach, who was really helpful in laying the infrastructure for this beautiful dream that we've been trying to create in reality for a long time. Delphine Sims, your vision and your ethics run through this project, and your mark you made so early on, and we are so appreciative of your work. Shout out to Gilberto Rosa Duran, too, who worked with us last year, and of course to Francesca Araujo and to Alexandra Gassesi. You have been doing all the things, all the work with us on the administrative bureaucratic sides, on the visionary sides, and just another lifting up of Barbara, who is holding so much of the work that we do and keeping us ethical and keeping us aligned to our values and making our dreams come true in the everyday. Thank you so much.